The cabin had no voices, no greetings, no quick steps, only the slow groan with expanding in heat, the gentle tick of boiling water on the stove, and the wind circling the roof like it was searching for a place to settle. I lay there on a frayed rug, wet fur clinging to my sides, legs sore, stomach hollow. But I didn't make a sound. I'd gone 3 days without food once, trapped beneath broken stone. I'd slept under wreckage, with rain and mortar falling above me. Hunger doesn't make me whimper. The man moved slowly, each step like he was second-guessing it. He didn't look at me, but I felt his gaze move across my back like a trail of ash. He poured boiling water into a chipped mug and sat by the fire. No lamps, no radio, just firelight dancing across weathered skin and a face full of lines that didn't all come from age. I rested my head on my front paws. The cut on my leg had stopped bleeding, but I didn't lick it. I didn't want to draw attention. I was here. That was enough. Then he stood, stepped toward me. I didn't flinch. His hand reached out, slow, like he was feeling through darkness. He stopped just before touching my back. His palm hovered, inches from my fur, neither retreating nor committing. I turned my head, slightly, met his eyes. I didn't growl, just looked. Eventually, he pulled his hand away, not in fear, more like restraint. He rummaged through a cabinet, then set down a dry towel and a bowl of warm water beside me. The water smelled faintly of mint, something natural, maybe steeped from a leaf he kept near the stove. I didn't lap it up right away. I sniffed first. No medicine, no sedatives, just water. I drank, slowly, then lowered my head again. He stepped back, returned to his chair, and then, after a long pause, he spoke. I wasn't looking for a dog. His voice was rough, like bark soaked in whiskey. I only opened the door because I could not. I didn't understand the words, but I knew that tone. It wasn't command. It wasn't a warning. It was a confession. We sat in silence again. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the cabin held. The fire crackled. I didn't sleep. I only listened. His breathing wasn't even. There were moments when he'd hold it, then release it like he was bracing against something unseen. Then, barely a whisper, "Don't die here." I wouldn't. I never thought I was allowed to die. All I knew was, if I could stay just a little longer, maybe I wouldn't have to leave again. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pressing gently against my back. The cabin was still there. So was he. He was at the stove, poking at the kindling with a worn stick. There was no rush in his movement, only habit. Routine done so many times a body moves before the mind can object. I got up. My right leg was stiff. I limped a few paces and sat near the fire. He turned and noticed. He didn't speak, but I saw the moment his shoulders dropped, just slightly. Then he turned to the back of the cabin and pulled out a wooden chest. From it, he took an old cloth and something hanging by a worn leather strap. A collar, not mine, but familiar. The scent was layered, dust, grass, and a long-dried sweetness I recognized as milk. A young one scent. I approached, slowly, inhaled deeply. I didn't lick it, didn't nudge it, but I held that smell like a memory I'd never had. He sat down, his back curved, not from age, but from a weight he'd stopped trying to carry upright. "It was hers," he said. "Buddy." I didn't know what that word meant, but I heard him say it again. And again, quietly. She took him into the woods that day. I told her, "Don't go far." She didn't listen. His voice caught. It wasn't her fault. Not the dog's either. It was mine. I didn't go after her. I figured she'd know the way. He swallowed hard, like each word was a stone he hadn't meant to pick up. By the time I did go, it was too late. I didn't nudge him. I didn't press my weight against his side. I just sat there, near enough that if he fell, I'd be the one to brace him. He placed the collar down, slowly, like it might break. His hands trembled, the same hands that once carried rifles without shaking. And I thought, maybe I'm not the only one here who needs saving. Maybe he is, too. In the early days at the cabin, he never called me anything. Not Ranger. Not Buddy. Not even Hey or Boy. There was only silence, and the way his eyes would glance past me without ever really landing. If I came close, he looked away. If I stayed distant, he didn't call me back. I used to have a number, a metal tag, but now I had no name. And strangely, that didn't make me feel less seen, because I understood. A name isn't the same as being allowed to stay. He let me sleep near the fire. He put down an old blanket beside his worn chair. That first night, I lay still, didn't stir. The second night, I rested my head on the edge of that blanket, ears tilted toward him. He didn't sleep well. Every few hours, he'd jolt awake, as if summoned by something only he could hear. Sometimes he'd rise and press his palm to the door, like he was half a step from running. Then he'd freeze, hand still, breath held, like memory had locked the knob. I didn't move. I just watched. By the third night, I heard him speak in sleep. "Sweetheart, just wait a minute." His voice cracked through the dark, low and trembling. He didn't say a name. But in that moment, I felt like I knew what it meant to miss someone so much your chest won't let it go. I crept closer, not to wake him, just to lie near the bed, close enough that he could feel another heartbeat if he needed one. By morning, he said nothing about the dream. He made coffee, left a piece of stale bread near the floor. He didn't toss it, didn't hide it, just pushed it toward me, without looking. I didn't eat right away. I waited. In the old days, I waited for command, a cue, but none came. Eventually he spoke, without looking at me. "Go ahead. I'm not hungry anyway." It wasn't sharing. It was surrender. So I ate, quietly, leaving nothing behind. That afternoon, he pulled out a small tin box, dented and old. Inside were photographs. I smelled ink, age, and something else. The scent of sorrow, maybe folded into paper. The first photo was a girl, young, laughing, her arms wrapped around a small brown dog. Her cheeks were red from the cold. The dog was licking her hand. No fear in either of them. The second photo, him, but younger, in uniform, standing next to men who probably weren't alive anymore. I didn't know their names, but I knew that look of men who'd seen things they weren't allowed to speak about. He stared at those photos a long time. Then he spoke again. "I never took them into the woods," he murmured. "Should have gone with them." I tilted my head, not because I understood the words, but because his voice shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt. It was ache, that kind that doesn't bleed, just quietly hollows. Later that day, I saw him do something unexpected. He pulled the old collar from the box, tied it to a fraying leash, and hung it on the hook near the front door. Not back in the box, not hidden under a blanket, out in the open where it could be seen. I approached, sniffed. The scent was the same, but lighter now. He saw me and watched for a long moment. Then he said, softly, "It's not that I'm replacing Buddy. I'm not." He paused. "I just noticed you haven't left." I didn't bark, didn't wag. I just stood there, still, present, and he didn't flinch. He turned back toward the fire, stopped before disappearing into the hallway. He spoke one more time. "I'm not naming you. You already know who you are." I stayed where I was, listening to the slow creak of the cabin settling into itself again. The fire popped. The snow tapped the windows. And for the first time since I left the compound, I felt no need to look over my shoulder, because this man who had no more names to give had still chosen not to send me away. And somehow that was enough. I've slept beside gunfire, beside helicopters dropping into darkness, beside the sound of human hearts racing just before an ambush. I've guarded bleeding soldiers, waited in silence beneath broken vehicles, listened for the ticking of things that shouldn't tick. But I had never slept beside a man like him. He didn't speak, but he dreamed. And when he dreamed, the cabin wasn't a cabin anymore. It became a trench, a field hospital, a shadowed hallway where something once went terribly wrong. I could tell because I heard it in his breathing. His whispers came like splinters of radio static, not full sentences, just names. Jack, Murphy, Lynn, and one that returned again and again, softer each time, Ellie. That name stayed in the room like the scent of burnt wood. When he said it, his whole chest seemed to hold still, like the name alone was a trigger. I was lying just outside his room, not inside, never inside. Some boundaries are older than instinct. Even trained dogs don't cross them without invitation. But that night, when he moaned and twisted in his sleep, sweat cutting through the wool of his blanket, I stood, moved quietly to his door. Didn't bark, didn't scratch. I simply placed my muzzle against the edge of the bed. He turned in his sleep, breath quick and sharp, hands clenched around a pillow like it might vanish. I didn't move. I just let him hear me breathing. After a while, his shoulders dropped, his grip loosened. I backed away, padded back to my spot outside his door, and lay down again, ears up, eyes closed, still guarding. By morning, he said nothing about the night before. He made coffee, left a bowl of water and a piece of bread on the floor, not from leftovers, but something set down on purpose. For me, he didn't look directly at me, but he muttered under his breath, "You heard it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "Yeah," he said. "I guess it's still in there." I knew what he meant. We survivors, we hear what others have forgotten. That afternoon, he went outside to split wood. I watched from the cabin door. He held the axe like a man who used to hold a weapon, but now just wanted fire to come a little easier. Each swing was slow, rhythmic, less about cutting, more about keeping time with something only he could hear. A crow landed on a branch nearby. It didn't caw, just stared. I growled not loud, but enough. I don't like being watched too long by things that don't blink. He looked up, followed my gaze, then spoke again, this time more to the wind than to me. "It's not you," he said. "It's what I brought back with me." I didn't understand who or what it was, but I watched his shoulders slump slightly, the axe head drop lower, like he wasn't fighting the past this time, just admitting it still lived here. That night, he pulled out a notebook, not one for tracking groceries or chores. This one was older, bound in cracked leather, the pages yellowed, the corners curled. I recognized the scent of ink and dust and hesitation. He wrote, not fast, not often. Each scratch of the pen felt deliberate, like he was recording facts, but extracting something lodged deep in the bone. I didn't sleep. I lay nearby, listening to the sound of each letter arriving like footsteps through snow. When he finally stopped, he stared at the page for a long time. Then he closed the book gently. No sigh, no drama, just quiet. "Tomorrow," he said, not to me, but to the empty space between us, "I'm going to burn it." I didn't know what was in that notebook, but I knew what it meant to carry something too long. Later, as the fire dimmed and the night settled around the cabin like a heavy blanket, I crept closer, not to interfere, just to be near. He was asleep in the chair, arms crossed, head tilted back. I curled up near his feet, nose resting on my paws. The logs popped softly. The wind outside softened its voice. And for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to close my eyes, not out of exhaustion, but trust. I was no longer guarding a battlefield. I was sharing a night with a man who hadn't let himself rest in decades. And now maybe he could. I was trained to detect danger before it showed its face. The smell of blood, the cold metal tucked beneath a coat, a heartbeat too fast in a crowd, trying too hard to look calm. I don't guess. I know. And that night, I knew. It began with scent. Not animal, not bear, not fox. Human. Old jacket, worn wool, stale tobacco tucked into its seams, a hint of gasoline, and the sharp dryness of alcohol that had faded but not left. I stood. The wind was shifting. He was still by the fire, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, the other resting lightly on his leg. The journal sat closed beside him. He hadn't written in it since the night before, just held it sometimes, like memory was too hot to touch, but too cold to leave alone. I let out a low growl. Just once. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough. He looked up, not at me, but toward the frost-covered window. He heard it too, a presence, not imagined, not unfamiliar. He set the cup down, not in a hurry, but without hesitation. There were footsteps outside. Measured. Intentional. Not a hiker. Not lost. Someone who knew where they were coming and who they might find. I moved to the door. Nose to the base. I inhaled. Yes. Human. Male. Middle-aged. No fear in the scent, just fatigue, guilt, and something heavy with time. He followed. Didn't speak. Just picked up the flashlight hanging near the coat rack. Clicked it once to test. Then paused with his hand on the knob. He opened the door a few inches. The wind rushed in like it had something urgent to say. And then the voice came. "Jack, is that you?" The name hit the cabin walls like a knock that didn't need permission. His body stiffened beside me. Not from fear, from memory. "No one else lives here," he replied, voice low, steady. The man outside didn't move closer. Didn't laugh. Didn't greet. I was passing through. Didn't plan to stop. "You're standing at my door. That's not passing." Silence. The kind that grows teeth. Then, back then, I let her walk home alone. Thought you were going to meet her. My ears pinned back. The air tightened. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it came out rough. I thought so too. I stepped forward, placed myself between him and the open door. I didn't bare teeth. Didn't bark. I just stood there. A presence. A line. He opened the door wider. Wind pulled at his coat. Snow fell in clumps from the edge of the roof. The man on the porch didn't cross the threshold. He looked older than his voice. Gray beard, sunken eyes. The kind of tired that sits behind the ribs. "I'm not here for forgiveness," he said. "I haven't slept in years. I hear her name when I close my eyes." He didn't answer right away. Then, "So do I?" They stood there, two men framed by winter and regret, not facing off, just facing it. Eventually, Jack nodded once. "You should go," he said, voice firm but not cruel. "You're still breathing. That's enough." The man stepped back, didn't argue, didn't plead, just turned and walked into the snow. We listened until his footsteps faded into silence. Jack shut the door, didn't speak. I moved beside him, settled quietly at his feet. He lowered himself slowly to the floor, leaning against the door, as if the act of closing it had taken something from him. He rested a hand on my head, not like before, not hovering, not unsure, solid, grateful. "You stood there," he said, voice rasping. "You didn't growl, didn't lunge. You just waited for me to decide." I looked up at him. He didn't flinch this time. His eyes were glassy, but the lines around them had softened. "Dogs like you," he whispered, "know more than we do." I didn't answer, didn't move, but I felt something shift deep inside, like a door being opened not outward, but inward. That night, he fell asleep in the old armchair. I curled at his feet. No one had to guard the cabin, but I did it anyway, not because of duty, but because, for the first time in years, someone had chosen to face what haunted them, and I was there to witness it. The snow had fallen hard all night. By morning, the world outside looked untouched, quiet, clean, like nothing had ever happened here. But I knew better. He had already been up, standing by the doorway with his coffee and that far-off stare. He wore like an old uniform. I could smell the change in him. He wasn't searching anymore, not exactly. Just waiting for whatever was going to come. I stepped out with him. The air bit my nose. Ice crusted the wooden steps. The snow came up to his knees, higher than my chest. Every step he took left a clear, deep imprint. And then I saw it. Not our prints. Another trail, coming in from the tree line. Diagonal. Limping. Fresh. Not deer. Not fox. Dog. Young. Injured. I stopped breathing for a second. Caught something sharp in the scent. Blood. Old and thin. Clinging to fur. I looked back at him. He had noticed too. We followed the tracks. He didn't say a word. Just pulled on his coat, grabbed gloves, and tucked a small folding knife into his pocket. I walked ahead, my nose low to the snow, ears twitching with every sound the forest offered. The trail led us down a shallow slope, through a clearing, then around a fallen pine. Every so often, I'd stop and wait for him to catch up. His breathing was heavier than usual. but he didn't turn back. Then we saw it. Curled at the base of a bent tree, half buried in snow and pine needles, was a dog, German shepherd, young, male. His leg was twisted beneath him. Blood crusted the back paw. His coat was thin, patchy. His ribs moved too fast beneath his skin. He saw me first. Didn't growl. Didn't move. He just watched, eyes dull but aware, like someone still willing to trust but too tired to ask. I stepped closer. No threats. No posturing. I lowered my ears, dropped my head, not to dominate. To tell him, I see you. He whimpered once. Quiet. And then nothing. The man stepped forward slowly. I felt his weight beside me. The same presence that had stood beside me in so many silences now taking another one on. He knelt, set his flashlight down. "Oh, kid," he murmured. "What the hell happened to you?" The pup didn't flinch. Just lay there, chest rising. Jack pulled off his glove, uncapped a water bottle, and offered a few drops to the dog's mouth. He licked them, once, then let his head fall back into the snow. "He won't make it if we leave him here," he said. I didn't move, because I already knew we weren't leaving. Jack took off his outer coat, slid it under the pup's fragile body. He lifted him gently, shifting the weight as if holding something he was afraid might break in his hands. His jaw tightened, but he didn't grunt, didn't complain. I walked beside him all the way back. When we reached the cabin, he shouldered the door open with his back, snow falling in clumps from the hem of his pants. He laid the pup down on the rug near the fire, the same rug I had slept on that first night. The pup stirred but didn't wake. I stepped over, sniffed his ears, his paws, his wounded leg. The scent was so familiar it made my chest ache. Not war, not danger, loneliness. Jack crouched beside us, breathing hard, sweat shining through his shirt despite the cold. "Another guest," he said softly. Then he looked at me, really looked. "You think he belongs here?" I didn't blink, didn't tilt my head. I just stepped forward, circled once, and lay down beside the pup, not touching, just close enough to be felt. The fire cracked softly. Jack stood, rubbed his hands on his jeans, and looked around the room, at the collar still hanging by the door, at the etched wooden nameplate resting on the windowsill, at the quiet bodies resting where silence used to be. That night, the snow fell again. But the cabin didn't feel like a shelter anymore. It felt like a base, a post, a place where no one got left behind. That night, the cabin wasn't quiet in the way it had been before. It wasn't the wind, wasn't the storm. It was something inside, something shifting, because another heartbeat now filled the room. The young dog lay curled beside me, his breathing shallow, uneven. Every so often, he let out a sound, not pain, not panic, but something in between, like a dream he couldn't escape. The man sat in his chair, one hand resting on his leg, the other on the worn journal that had remained closed since the stranger came to the door. He stared into the fire. His face looked softer, not from rest, but from release, as if the weight he'd carried for decades had shifted slightly, no longer lodged in just one place. Then he stood, slowly, walked over to the table and picked up the journal, opened it, not to write, just to look. The room was quiet, except for the faint crackle of the logs and the even softer rhythm of 3 breaths, mine, his, and the one fighting to stay steady on the rug. He spoke without looking up. "You know," he said, "I once told my daughter that war only happens out there, outside." I lifted my head. "But I was wrong," he said. "War lives in here too." He tapped his chest. "And sometimes it never ends, not even when the shooting stops." He stared at the page like it held a map he couldn't read. "She used to say, 'You don't have to go save the world, Dad. Just stay home. That's enough.'" His voice caught, but I left anyway. And when she went into those woods, I wasn't there to meet her. He didn't cry, but something in the way his body folded slightly, like a roof bearing too many winters, said more than tears could. I watched. I didn't move. The young dog stirred beside me. His ear twitched. His legs stretched out a little farther. And then, without warning, he lifted his head. Not fully, just enough. And he howled. Not loud. Not long. Just one soft, cracked note that floated into the beams above and settled into the wood. It wasn't a call. Wasn't a cry for help. It was a sound that seemed to speak to something no one else could name, something buried deep in all of us, behind the memory, beyond the ache. The man froze. The fire popped. And for a moment, no one moved, because we all knew what that sound was. It was a name never spoken, a goodbye never said, a guilt too old to confess. That howl, it wasn't meant for the forest. It was meant for what we leave behind when we pretend we've already healed. It was a sound of carrying someone in silence for too long. The man put the journal down, didn't close it, didn't turn the page. He walked over to the young dog, knelt beside him, and placed a hand gently on his back. "If you hadn't come," he whispered, "I might have never heard it." He looked at me next. "You've stayed so quiet," he said, "for so long." I met his eyes, and something opened in me too. Not a bark, not a growl, just the beginning of a sound I'd kept locked in my throat for years. The sound of not being asked to leave. The sound of not needing permission to stay. That night, we didn't keep watch. We didn't guard the cabin. We didn't wait for danger. We simply were 3 survivors, one old, one young, one learning to live again, lying side by side in a room full of ghosts. And for the first time in a long, long while, none of us needed to say a thing. By morning, the storm had finally passed. The sky was a pale, quiet blue, the kind you only see after something violent is broken and then gently let go. Light came through the cabin windows like silk through fingers, soft, forgiving. I opened my eyes to warmth. The fire had burned low, but not out. The young dog still slept beside me, curled tightly, his breast steady now. No whimpers, no trembling. The man was already up. I could smell the coffee, that bitter comfort he brewed each morning. Not because he needed caffeine, but because some habits are the only thing left standing. I rose slowly, stretched, walked to the door. It was open just enough for the cold to linger near the threshold, but not enter. He stood on the porch, his coat buttoned, the old tin cup in his hand steaming against the air. I joined him, stepping onto the snow-dusted wood. Everything outside was glazed in silver. Not white, silver. The way things look after pain, when they start reflecting light again. For a long while, neither of us moved. We just stood there, side by side, listening to the sound of nothing urgent. "It's quiet," he said. I didn't turn to look. I didn't need to. That word, quiet, didn't mean silence. Not today. It meant peace. He reached down, fingers brushing the top of my head with a gentleness that was becoming familiar. "Didn't think I'd get another one of these mornings," he said. "Didn't think I'd want one." He paused and added, "But here it is." And it was. Later, he brought out a piece of wood and an old carving knife. He sat in the sunlight by the cabin wall, resting the plank across his knees. He didn't ask for anything, didn't call me over. But I lay near him anyway, watching the way his hands worked. Slow, sure, quiet. He carved a name into the wood. Not mine, not his daughter's. Just one word. Hope. He stared at it for a while when he finished, then stood, brushed off the shavings, and hung the sign inside, right above the old collar still hanging by the door, not replacing it, just letting it have company. That evening, he made another fire. He fed the young dog first, gently, with the care of someone who used to be afraid of giving too much. The pup took the food, without fear now. There was trust in his eyes. Fragile, but real. We lay by the fire, all 3 of us, him in the chair, legs stretched, the pup beside the hearth, and me at my usual post, not guarding, just being. "You know," he said quietly, "I think I'll drive to town tomorrow, get more supplies, a few things for the both of you, maybe see if the local shelter can help with his leg." He didn't say it like someone preparing to hand us off. He said it like someone making room. "Don't worry," he added, glancing at me. "I'm not letting anyone take you." Then softer still, as if to himself, "Not this time." Outside, the snow glowed under moonlight. The wind had settled into something soft, more breath than blow. Somewhere in the trees, a bird called out, faint and quick, like a question already answered. Inside, we didn't speak anymore. Didn't need to. I rested my head on my paws and listened to the rhythm of the room. Logs shifting, the pup sighing in his sleep, the old man's breath steady, not broken by memory. And I thought, this is what survival sounds like. Not shouting, not running, not even a fight. Just staying. Staying after the storm has passed. Staying when there's no order to stay. Staying because something in you recognizes that someone else, finally, is ready to stay too. And so we did. An old man with too many ghosts. A young pup who never had a name. And me, a dog who was never trained to rest. We stayed. And for the first time, none of us fell. Sometimes it's not the storms outside that break us, but the ones we carry quietly within. And sometimes all it takes is a wounded creature at the door to remind us that healing doesn't always roar. It often enters softly, limping and uninvited. This wasn't just a story about a dog. It was about memory, about guilt, about the way lost cars hollows inside us that we stop noticing, until something or someone fills them without asking for anything in return. If you've ever had a moment like that, where a simple act of kindness pulled you back from the edge, I'd love to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. Maybe it was a stray cat, a letter in the mail, or just someone showing up when you didn't know how to ask. Whatever it was, it mattered. And if this story stayed with you, even just a little, feel free to share it with someone who might need quiet company tonight. Thanks for being here. Until next time, take care of what's silent in you. It often speaks the loudest.